Hi, thank you for joining us for February's Newcastle Develop event. I'm Lucy Pritchard and I'm the Alumni Relations Manager. And tonight or today, depending where you are, we'll be discussing networking in a hybrid world. As we all probably know, a network is a group of interconnected people, and naturally, we all create networks, whether we're comfortable at doing it or not. So whether this is with our friends, family, colleagues, or people we've met at an event. And whether professionally or personally, our networks can be a great source of support for us in development, in progression, and to help us with any of the needs that we have. So in the last 2 decades, thanks to social media, our networks have grown exponentially, which has meant we can have a larger number of people within our network, but also a greater diversity. This increases the potential power of our networks, which sounds great, but how can you actually utilize your networks? And also the pandemic has accelerated the world of hybrid working, and with it, hybrid networking. So how can you build, engage, and harness the power of your network in this new hybrid world? Hopefully, the panel and our event host will be discussing some of those issues and points tonight. So without further ado, I would really like to introduce our chair. Justin Cole is the Executive Director of External Relations at Newcastle University. Now, Justin joined the university in 2021 and is a former chair of the University Marketing Forum. He continues to serve on the European Board of the Council for the Advancement and Support of Education, or CASE to those of us who know it. And Justin previously worked in the civil service, principally as a communications advisor to successive higher education ministers and to the Paymaster General, before more recently serving as a director at Sheffield Hallam and Bournemouth University. Thank you very much for joining us tonight, Justin, and for agreeing to host this evening's discussions. And I will pass over to you now.
Thank you, Lucy, for that very kind introduction. It's my absolute pleasure to be here this evening. I'm myself broadcasting from Kingsgate House, for those of you who recall Kingsgate House here at Newcastle University. So it's a tremendous pleasure to be joining you this evening. My first task is to introduce the panelists, those very kind individuals who have given up their time to join us here this evening. We have Kerry, Sam and Herb. And I'll just be introducing each of those individuals briefly before then asking them a brief question to just kick us off. So I'll start with Kerry. Kerry, currently employed with Northeast One or any one Newcastle districts, Business Improvement District. Kerry manages a program of 40 annual events, bringing together cross-sector businesses, education and youth providers, delivering real-life careers advice to young people across the region, alongside running business-to-business networking events within the city. So welcome to Kerry. Sam next. Sam is a high impact career coach with a no nonsense approach to getting the job you really want. Sam's worked with people who have gone on to land jobs with the International Olympic Committee, the World Economic Forum, Nike, Amazon, Facebook, Virgin, Red Bull Racing, Rolls-Royce and the NHS, to name but a few. Over the years, Sam's worked with a variety of people to either land elusive first jobs or coach senior leaders to put some real strategy behind their career growth. He's also worked with people to get lucrative promotions and supported people returning to work after redundancy. Essentially, if your job search is taking too long or you're struggling to get the job offers you want, then Sam's your man. Finally, we have Herb Kim, who's the founder of the long-running Think Digital conference, which many of you will be familiar with. He's also the founder of TEDx Newcastle and former Goldman Professor of Innovation and Entrepreneurship at Newcastle University Business School. He was included in both The Guardian's and The Wired magazine's list of top 100 movers and or shakers. So we're delighted to have, of course, Herb join us. So welcome to our panelists, Kerry, Sam and Herb. I'm going to begin or kick us off by asking firstly Kerry, then Sam, then Herb, as to what their interpretation of networking is. So Kerry, can I come to you first? Firstly, Kerry, welcome and thank you again for giving up your time to join us this evening. I'm really keen to get your take on what networking is and how you've deployed it, perhaps over the course of your career.
Yeah, absolutely. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for inviting me along to the panel. I'd just like to say that I'm joining you from the reception of Kenton School because I coach netball and I have under 16s game right after this. So apologies, firstly, for what I'm wearing, where I'm sitting. You may be thinking she's not been very successful in her career. Where is she? If there's any noise, there's nothing I can do about it. But yeah, we're all part of a bigger team. So what is networking to me? And I was thinking about this after you guys mentioned it to me the other day. Networking to me, I can only use the analogy of a Victorian coffee house. So actually networking isn't a new concept, it's something that's been around for hundreds of thousands of years. The only thing that's changed is the channel of communication that we use. So if you imagine LinkedIn and say that as a Victorian coffee house, people are coming in, running in, what's happening here, what's happening there. Networking is something that before you get a career, people would maybe call you nosy. It's just taking that characteristic and applying it to the business and professional world around you. I network every day, every minute of every day in my personal and professional lives. I'd say it's the cornerstone of my career in many ways, and it gives you a good foundation to stay in tune with what's happening within your own business, within your own region, within your own sector, globally. And I love it. I was a prolific networker in my early career when I worked in sales and events. As I've kind of had more years of experience under my belt, I've came on the other side of networking, so run our own networking groups. Your networks change all the time, and it really is that cornerstone of your career in many, many ways, and it's something which is constantly developing. The channels of communication, how your network, so pre-pandemic generally was in real life at events. During the pandemic, generally was on Zoom or Teams. Post-pandemic, it's probably both. And in 2 years, there'll be a different channel of communication, but it's something that we all do every day to help us to do our jobs and be successful in our lives.
Thank you, Kerry. I'm curious, just in terms of follow-up question, how did you get started with networking? Was it an easy thing for you, a natural progression, or did it take some work?
Absolutely not. And I find it quite interesting now that I run my own networking events. So your entire life you're told not to speak to strangers. Then suddenly you come out of education, you get a job, and you're pretty much told to go into a room of strangers, speak to everybody in there. Not only should you do that, but you should actually come out with some sales leads as well. It's a pretty terrifying experience. I don't understand why it isn't on the curriculum. We certainly tackle it in my program that I deliver now. I'm quite passionate about it. Going to a room of strangers who, when I first started, most people in there were wearing suits. It was quite a formal business-like environment. Terrifying. I was sales manager at, I was the general manager of a castle in East Lothian, just outside of Edinburgh. Quite a big profile of venue. I moved up to Edinburgh for the job. I didn't know anybody there. And started going to all of these big convention bureau events where everybody knows everyone, which you find in Newcastle, certainly Village, so is Edinburgh. The globe is really, it's terrifying. And answer your question, that's how I got started. But you can't say no when you're told to do something. You just got to do it, and you just got to go in and kind of front it out. And I just tackled that by hugging a cup of tea and standing next to the food table, which is still where you'll find me at most events. You just got to get stuck in. It's not easy. It doesn't really get any easier. You just find different coping mechanisms, I would say.
Yeah, indeed. And thank you for being so candid. I too, relatively shy, I think, in terms of my personal life, but I suppose there's a degree of learned behaviour as it relates to networking that you really do just have to get stuck in and push yourself, I suppose, in creating those initial networks. So, so thank you very much for opening remarks there, Kerry. Much appreciated. Can I turn to Sam now? Sam, I'm curious as to your experience and first encounter perhaps with networking. How has networking worked for you?
Well, I find myself nodding along with a lot of what Kerry was saying there, and certainly share some of those early experiences. But I think we get introduced to networking in quite a painful way, and I think I now see it very differently. So for me, if I can summarize it, networking is not about those awkward meetings with strangers. It's not about embarrassing exchanges of business cards and all that awkwardness. Not at all. For me now, networking is really about operating and living your life with a spirit and attitude of being able to help others through firstly understanding what they want, and what they're looking for. So it's about finding what they want, also what you can bring as well, and also about connecting other people together. And I think that when you think of it like that, removes so much of that awkwardness. I really do very few networking events in that way, but what I do, especially these days, is try to listen to what people are saying they're after, and then think about, well, who could that help? Who else could that? And I really go out of my way to be a connector of people. And I think that when you network in that way, you're just helping people. You're connecting people who need something with people who can give that to them. And guess what? People love that. So it makes it a very different experience than those sort of awkward meetings that we sometimes start to think about with networking. So for me, it doesn't have to be that way. It can be a much more practical, and I hope useful, and frankly less terrifying experience.
And your initial experiences, Sam, of this? I mean, I think yours is quite a reassuring, I suppose, narrative as to the those seeking to get started with networking. We all do it, of course, but some more experienced than others. And I'm curious as to your first encounters. Did you have that horrible, awkward initial encounter, or did you quite naturally approach it from the way in which you've described?
Well, I think I'm a very natural introvert. And so the idea of being very gregarious and going out there and putting yourself out there comes very unnaturally and frankly very uncomfortably to me. So I think the way that I got into this was, it occurred to me when I looked at people who were being successful, that they always seemed to be successful because they knew the right people. It was other people that were opening doors. And I don't think that I certainly don't mean that comes to mean privilege. It's not always the privileged people that get ahead, and I think we've got lots of examples, especially these days, where it's not so much where you're from that it really comes down to. But I think these days it's so much easier, and Lucy mentioned already about the transformation of social media, of course, and the way that we can reach each other and network continually with each other across the last, well, she said 20 years. It's been a long time where this has been developing, but especially in the last few years, it's made things so different. And so I think for me, that formative experience here was when I realized that if I don't get to know other people, and if I don't reach out to those other people, they're not going to come looking for me. And so I had to get involved in networking. And then what I discovered, to my delight, was if you reach out to successful people, successful entrepreneurs, business people, it tends to be absolutely them that are the warmest, the easiest ones to speak to. They reach out because they perhaps empathize, they were where you were not so long before. And I always think of it as almost them putting their hand down from someone who is, if you like, up high, having achieved more than you. And very often people are there and they're very willing, if you ask, I tend to find. So once I realized that if you started having these conversations, and it's not just about saying, can you give me this, can you help me up? It's about saying, how can I help you with what you're doing, and giving before you expect to receive. There's a business networking group called BNI, which I used to be a part of, and BNI, their whole philosophy was about, and their motto was give as gain. So really give more to get more. And that's always worked really, really well for me. So, and I think since I started trying to give more rather than trying to get more from my networking, it really has transformed both how easy I found it and also the results.
Some really sage words there, Sam, particularly about having the courage and of course the return from the conversations that you might wish to have with those who are at a more senior stage in their career. I too have experienced that circumstance, that people are incredibly generous with their time when you do approach them. So just with a small degree of courage, you can see great returns in terms of those networks. So thank you for those opening remarks, Sam. We are without Herb. He's, I think I understand, running a little late. So Herb will be joining us soon, no doubt. What I'd like to do at this stage is just move to our questions. As of course Lucy said from the outset, just post your questions into the Q&A, and that we will then, I will then pose them to the panel. So we have a range of questions that were submitted in advance, and I'm going to set the first one for Kerry. The question reads, I'm looking to change jobs in the absence of face-to-face networking events. How would you suggest approaching potential employers or making connections meaningfully online? Kerry, your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, absolutely. I think my first question would be, is there an absence of real life events? Actually, do you know that? Is that 100%? I know, like, I'm running a networking event tomorrow morning with 96 people registered in half term with the Metros off. So don't take for granted that that is happening. If the event you'd normally go to is off, is there another event? I would just approach it. You just need to make a hit list. So just make a list of where you'd like to work. You know, make sure you're connected with those people on LinkedIn. And as Sam said, just reach out to them. You know, reach out to the business owner, reach out to the head of department, reach out to the HR department. Quite often the jobs might not actually be up there and advertised yet, but just have the courage to ask, because at the minute you're sort of sitting there thinking, oh, I'd really love to work for them, but I'm just looking at jobs boards and nothing's coming up. Firstly, nothing might ever come up, actually. They might just hire on recommendation. You don't know what the policy is, how they recruit. So just send them a message. You know, the worst case scenario is you're not going to get any response whatsoever, but then you're in exactly the same position that you're in right now, except you know that actually you did try and you didn't get anything back. Be a little bit of a legal stalker. I'm certainly not encourage any illegal activity, but find out where those people go. So the name of the company, get on their social channels, where are they going? It might not be the HR manager there or the head of department, but junior execs might be there. Go to the same network events that they do. Everybody loves to tell you where they're going. Just go on LinkedIn and stalk them and make sure you're listening to the employees that work there and the information they're telling you, which is vast. Get yourself along to those events where they are. Follow them on social, all this stuff which probably sounds really, really obvious, but you have to do it strategically. So don't just have a scattergun approach and think, I'd like to work anywhere, I just want a new job anyway. Be strategic, make a list, and I would say exhaust every possibility from that list before you move on. So like literally any event that they're at, anything that they're sponsoring, get yourself there. And if you've got any thoughts to add to that and you can join in that conversation on social, do. Not at the expense of, you know, your own integrity. So if you literally haven't got a clue what they're talking about, don't just put a random comment in just to get involved. But be honest and say, oh, this sounds really interesting. What's happening? I'd love to know more. You know, anything that's on social, which is everything, is asking for a conversation to be had, and therefore it's generally quite an open one. You could certainly get involved, but it's just reaching out. You're just using LinkedIn, which gives you a great platform to be slightly less formal and find out more, because everybody loves to tell you what they're doing.
Yeah, indeed. And I'm really interested in your opening remark there about the return to physical events, that we shouldn't assume that they're not on. What's your sense in organising events of this nature, these networking events? Is there a real appetite emerging, I suppose, from people to get back to face-to-face? Is that what you're seeing in terms of your event?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just, you know, everything's just a little bit more commonsensical, which is a made-up word, but yeah, I'm sure you all know what I mean. Look, people have been stuck in the houses and the rooms. Some people are absolutely desperate to get out, and some people always have been, and some people literally go to the opening of a fridge door. Other people are more strategic and they choose what they're going to, and they're there for a specific reason or a specific need. It's not a case that real life or digital is better. It just, again, where's going to be the most effective thing for you, depending on what stage you're at in your career. Generally, if you are or perhaps younger, not necessarily young, but you have less years in terms of being in a profession or in, you know, full-time employment, my personal advice would be you need to get out there in real life, because you're not just kind of being able to create your own public brand and, you know, speak to people and put yourself in front of potential employees, but actually what you're really making is a professional network of contemporaries who just, I mean, I'm friends now with a lot of people that I met networking in my early 20s, and we've all kind of progressed together in different roles in different sectors, but you're creating that cohort of individuals that you can have honest conversations with, and with that face-to-face networking, you're creating ambassadors on your behalf. So quite often someone else sells you or your product without you having to even say anything. It's so important, I think, earlier on in your career to get out and meet as many people as possible, but not without strategy.
Yeah, indeed. I think that definitely resonates with my experience. I think with networks, it certainly can help you get onto a shortlist. It won't get you the job, but it'll certainly get you noticed such that you get on that shortlist. So very helpful reflections there, Kerry. Sam, I'm going to turn to you next. I think this question is most appropriate for you, given the success you've had in getting people's, supporting people and landing their dream jobs, many of which will, of course, be overseas. How can you create overseas connections is the next question. So Sam, how can you create overseas connections? Your thoughts on that one?
Ooh, well, I think that this is probably where social media, and coming back to what Kerry was just saying as well about getting out there physically, I think one of the best ways I've started creating connections overseas is by traveling overseas and getting involved in events overseas. Working overseas, I've been fortunate as I've built through my career to have worked now in over 50 countries, and many of the connections that I have now internationally are as a result of those projects. Wherever I've been working on a project team, LinkedIn was just coming into being when my consulting career kicked off, and so just as I started traveling internationally, that's what we started doing. So it was a question of meet in person first and then connect and then actually engage, because it's one thing connecting. You know, it's like when people used to exchange business cards and they would go to an event, they would get the business cards, they'd come back home and look at all these business cards I've got, this big stack, and then do nothing with them, which is like connecting with someone on LinkedIn and then doing nothing with that connection. So if you're not posting on LinkedIn now, we know that the algorithm, of course, is a thing unto itself, LinkedIn, and the reach naturally is really quite low. But the more engagement you can get from more of your followers, the more of their people are going to see you. And if you go into the creator mode on LinkedIn as well, that encourages people to follow you. So you start to get an audience. And I think that's quite important. I'm going to say as well, having something clear to say is very, very important, and to stand for one story or one big idea. Because if you try to get what I call slightly famous, if you try to get slightly famous for lots of different things, your energy across a platform or across anything that you're saying gets dissipated and gets lessened, and people don't know what you stand for. But when you think about many sort of famous people, they're famous for doing something. You know, in the past, people were maybe explorers. These days, people might be an Olympic athlete. You've just been watching the Winter Olympics. There's all kinds of things that people get famous for. If you're known for doing one thing, I always like the example of, in any given office, there's usually the person who can make Excel sing, the person who can make the chart look the way you want it to look in your mind, even if you can't make it work on the screen. And that person's famous for being able to do that. So what is it you're going to be famous for? Make sure that when you're connecting internationally, you get known for that one thing. And it doesn't matter where people are. This is the amazing thing now. People come to me from all over the world for careers help. Someone reached out, and it was via the university. Just last week, someone said, I see that we're both alumni of Newcastle University. She was in Taipei. We'd never spoken before, but we had Newcastle University in common. And so often that having that little bit of common ground and then trying to help each other. And that's exactly what we started to do. So I think that's what my advice would be. Stand for one clear thing and try to, as Kerry said, get out there if you can to kick things off, because it's at the heart of all those foundations, the people I've really met physically, they're the strongest connections still.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, so making something of those online connections in some sort of way, but as well as I was really taken by your point about posting and posting on a particular subject. I think that's very good advice, because that draws people in to the narrative you're putting across. So really helpful advice.
When I first started my career, I was with Procter & Gamble, and at P&G we had a wonderful model which took people through the journey of marketing a product. And one of the first things you had to do was drive trial of the product once you've got awareness of that. But later on came this idea of remind and remember. And people couldn't make what was called a repurchase, which was the sixth element of this cycle, unless they'd been reminded to remember what you were all about. And that's the purpose of the posts, really. They've met you, they've tried you once, if you like, if you were a product, they've had some experience of what you were doing. But if you let it go at that, they will forget you.
Yeah,
They'll be taken with the next thing. So you have to remind. If you remind on one thing, like any good brand does, then people will come back when they need what you do next time. And I think really that's how you build a reputation, much like a product will build its sort of brand strength.
Yeah, so true, so true. Thank you, Sam. Kerry, I'm going to turn to you for the next question. Question reads, I lead a really small charity. We contract out our staff, so I'm the only employee. It would be good to know how best to use a virtual network to fulfill some of the benefits I'm missing from not having a team, the opportunity to think through problems and sense check ideas and plans, etc. So your thoughts on that one, Kerry?
Yeah, completely. Totally understand that, totally get that. I was, freelance for a while, and it's quite a lonely world sometimes. Even if you work in the biggest team in the world, it can still be quite lonely. I think, you're talking there about a virtual network as opposed to a real life one. So I would, you just need to have a look on LinkedIn there will be groups like charity groups. I would link in with other charities who are of a similar size, as opposed to, I understand some of them might be competitors, but don't forget that you can be competitors but share those common challenges, and get together to thrash things out without actually taking business away from each other, obviously depending on what your charity is. I don't know what that is. Use the people that you subcontract out to as well. They will have networks, they obviously have skills that you use, so they may have secondary contacts that you can link in with. But it's just a case of getting in touch with groups again. Any thought leadership or any articles I would have a look for again on LinkedIn, any blogs, anything like that. Find out who's writing those, what situation are they in. Very often people putting a lot of the articles and things out there, they're either from massive corporations and they have whole departments that do this, or they're actually one or two individuals trying to make themselves appear bigger. So again, you might have common ground there. You just need to start making those connections on LinkedIn. And I think, again, it's just asking the questions of, hi, I see that you're in a similar position with me. How are you finding X, Y, and Z? And do you want to meet up for a coffee? Now, you don't have to do that in real life. You can actually absolutely put 20 minutes call in and just stick the kettle on and sit and just share those challenges. It depends on your personality. Obviously, some people find it much easier to connect in life. Some people would prefer to do it on Zoom. So you'll find a channel that communicates through that probably suits your personalities and gives you a good grounding. But you just got to do your research, there'll be other people. There's many other people out there. I mean, to be honest, give me a shout on LinkedIn, because I can think of 2 charities literally in the city centre of Newcastle who would be more than happy to have a chat with you, because they're in exactly the same position. And you've just got to use, firstly use your own network. Secondly, use those secondary networks you have, where they realise that not through the people you engage with and subcontract out to. And thirdly, think about, like, what is it that you want to connect about? So, you said, is there a particular challenge? Is it funding? Are you looking at access funding streams? You don't know where to go. Is it actually you're thinking about expanding, or you're thinking about something new? Establish what that is and your biggest need is, and then do research around those topics, and you should get a wealth of contacts from there, and then just reach out.
So Kerry, similar, I suppose, in part to Sam's advice earlier about having that key focus in terms of personal brand, have as well a key question that you're seeking to explore with others. I think that's really...
Absolutely. That's my biggest thing on networking, is of any form, and marketing. You must be strategic and understand why you're doing something. So whether you are going to an event, and that changes regularly for me. That can change from week to week, day to day, from job to job. So when I first started going networking, I had a product to sell. I was a sales manager of a hotel. So everyone was actually a potential customer. I was selling conference space, a bedroom. Someone might come for Sunday lunch. Someone might know someone that was getting married. So not as difficult, because I could hypothetically network at every event in the world. But you have to understand why you're going and what your need is and what you reach out. And if the answer to that is, I'm just lonely and I want to talk to other people who are in the same situation as me, that's fine. Yeah. It's still a reason. You still have that knowledge. If you cannot tell somebody why you're going to a networking event, including yourself, you shouldn't be going.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to have that focus in mind. I think that's
Yeah.
really helpful advice. And I was also struck by your suggestion of getting in touch with peers, and even those unseen peers, those peers that you don't even know are peers yet. There will be people doing a similar job in a different organisation who are going through the same difficulties, challenges, etc. So they can, of course, and will respond very generously, I think, to any approach. So I think that's been very helpful, Kerry. Thank you. Super. Sam, I'm going to turn to you next. The next question is, how would you go about creating a network in a different, in an area different from the one you might be familiar with, either through your studies or through your work so far? So you don't perhaps have experience in that area. How do you sort of reach out and develop a network? So, for example, you want to switch careers. This is, Sam, something you've had a lot to contend with, of course, in terms of the work you've done in support of so many people. Curious as to your thoughts on that one.
Sure. Well, I think that it's probably helpful for me here to introduce a bit of networking theory that we can use as a construct to explain how to go about doing this. So out of all the papers I read at university, there was one that stands head and shoulders in terms of the amount of use I've had out of what I read. And we're all in that boat. I'm sure that we've read plenty of papers to get our degrees. One paper was by a Professor Mark Granovetter, and it was written way back in 1977. And this work was groundbreaking, and the paper was called The Strength of Weak Ties. And let me just explain exactly what that was all about. Granovetter said that if you're in the center of your world, then immediately around you are what he called and referred to as your strong ties. And these are the people you're nearest and dearest, your loved ones, maybe your flatmates, your housemates, your wife, husband, brother, sister, the people you're closest to. And what he noted about these people was that they probably see the world in a similar way to you. You might share political views, or you might live in the same place physically. But then he said you've got the people who are more in the periphery of your network. Maybe if you've now been gone from university several years, perhaps people that you studied with, but now we've all gone to all corners of the world, right? We've all gone back home or traveled around. And even if we're just in different parts of the same country, we're far apart. And of course, that means that we start to have a very different perspective. And Granovetter described these weak ties, people that you don't see every day, like the ones that you might have as your strong ties. He said, they are your windows on the world. And that idea really stuck with me, because guess what? I can't see what's going off in Taipei. I can't see what's happening in Melbourne, Australia. I don't know what's happening. If I'm trying to move and build my career in Dubai, how do I do that? Well, what I need to do is find somebody who's in Dubai. And guess what? Through a university alumni network, someone will be there. And I can guarantee more than one. And I would probably go onto LinkedIn. I would use that facility, but I might also reach out to certain individuals, because this is the amazing thing. You don't know when you're sitting in that lecture theatre, if you think back to who were your peers. Likewise, you don't know when you think back to your previous jobs, the people that were sitting next to you who was just that guy in accounts, or just that woman who helped in HR, or whatever those people might have been that was in those different chairs that you didn't really work with. I say link in with them. Realize that the intern is probably going to be hiring you in 5 or 10 years time from now. So you better look after that intern. And these are your weak ties. And you're not saying, I need to be your best friend. What you're saying is, let's appreciate that we see the world differently. We can be windows on each other's world. Yeah. And if you stand for that one thing, if you're helping people, they'll recommend you. They'll say, gosh, if you want this, go to this person. They can really help you with this. And so what Granovetter discovered was that people find their jobs not through the people that are closest to them. Guess what? They see the world the way you see it. So they're not seeing all the different opportunities. But if you can build, and the paper was called, remember, The Strength of Weak Ties. So it's about building bonds to your acquaintances. Granovetter discovered that it was the acquaintances, and this was what was really interesting. He said 56% of jobs were found through acquaintances. So your weak ties. So you want to be really looking after those relationships, nurturing those relationships. But wait for it. What he also said was that if you want a well-paying job, like a really senior level job, I mean, do you want more money or less money? And I always like more money. I can always give more away. And what we discover is that 75% is what he found in his research of those well-paying jobs, the top jobs, the professional jobs, were found through weak ties. Yeah. So if you're wanting to move to a different location or move to a different industry, find some people who are in that industry, start to build into that space, build the connections there, and then ask them for their connections. That's how we start to do it.
Fantastic, Sam. I love the theory. I've written that down. I will shamelessly nick that. So thank you.
It's fantastic. There's a wonderful YouTube video with Granovetter himself explaining it. It's one of the very top ones that comes up if you search "strength of weak ties" on YouTube. It's absolutely worth watching.
Super. And as well, I suppose what you've highlighted is in terms of a response to the question about how you build networks in areas that you might be unfamiliar with. You've quite sensibly highlighted the alumni network of Newcastle University. I mean, there are people in all quarters of both geographically the world, but as well in terms of different sectors, who you will come across that have those connections. So it's best to start with that which is right in front of us, those alumni networks. Which
and I think we should be really proactive with this. And of course, we've all got GDPR and data protection, in every sense these days. So it's difficult just to hand out people's details. But I think one of the things when the university is looking to do more, I think that by allowing us to vote to be, if you like, open networkers, to be found or to be referred to, because certainly I would love to be referred to lots of other people. I'm really open to doing that. And that sounds like Kerry would be as well. We're the kind of people the reason we're here today is because she's giving me a thumbs up. We're into this, we know the value of it. And you just don't know quite where it's going to end up. But if you don't get started, it isn't going to lead anywhere. And I think being it's not for everybody. Not everybody knows this. It's kind of like, this is like the secret. The 29 people who are on this call with us, they now know this. We're revealing the secret, but I think we could all be so much more to each other as Newcastle alumni. And it gives us that trust straight off at the very beginning, which is so important to get things started.
Yeah, most definitely. Thank you for that, Sam. Fantastic response. Kerry, I've got a question for you, which I feel a kinship toward whoever it might have been that posed this. Any advice for introverts navigating conferences, both digitally and in person? Any advice appreciated? Kerry, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I'm quite excited for this question. I did say come in, and I'm speaking here now, leathering on, quite comfortably sitting here in my sports gear, but it wasn't always like this. So much advice. I could talk for an hour on this, but I won't. I think it's very important to know yourself, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert. You're confident in real life situations or you're not. I think first and foremost, you need to know what you are comfortable doing and what you're not, because you need to start at the beginning. How I'm speaking to you now, I couldn't have done this, 19 years ago when I graduated. Absolutely not. I would have been a wreck or come across as a moody teenager. So know your strengths and weaknesses. If you're talking about going to real life events, let's look at those first. Sam mentioned the BNI events. I was invited to one of those. I don't know why I went. I had to be there at 6:30 in the morning. I don't want to speak to anyone at 6:30 in the morning, not even myself. So why did I put myself in that situation? I'm setting myself up to fail. So think about the practicalities. What is it that you're thinking about going to? Is it an event where there's a speaker on? So actually there's a focus there. So everybody that's there is there to hear from somebody, to gain knowledge or insight in something that's happening. So straight away, you've got common ground there. You can go in quite quietly, you can take a seat, you can sit next to a stranger, You've been gifted a conversation starter. That might be more suitable for your character. If you're going to a general informal networking event, that might suit you because you think, well, there's lots of different types of characters here. If you're really nervous, I totally say this, you have to make a beeline for the tea and coffee table. That is your safe zone. Imagine that's your safe zone. You can stand there, fill tea and coffee. All anyone's going to speak to you about is, can you pass the sugar? Is there any milk? Oh, we've run out of hot water. There's no one else to speak to. You can speak to the person that's serving the tea or coffee. It gives you a safe zone. So always keep that on the back of your mind. But if you're at a general informal networking event where people are just milling about, it really falls into three types of people. I would say you get people that want to talk at you. You get people that just want to listen, which is, so if you're an introvert, that's great. An informal networking event, half of the room are going to come up to you and tell you all about them. what they do and try and sell you something, you can just smile and nod. And then there's the in-betweenies that I would say that are kind of there to listen a bit, to talk to a bit. They tend to be the more experienced people who've done it for a few years, they've found their feet, and you'll find yourself inevitably, a conversation will start at the tea table, there'll be 2, 3 or 4 people in there, one of them will be talking at you, someone else will be listening, someone else will be looking over your shoulder to see if there's a more interesting person or the friend coming in. But just be kind to yourself and make sure you go to something that you're comfortable going with. I mean, when I started, probably Sam, same for you, there wasn't a lot of choice with networking types of events. They were quite structured, quite formal, quite sell. As thankfully there's been a massive evolution of that. So, you know, you can go and have a Nerf Wars event. You can go and do a 5-a-side networking event. You can do a walking networking event. There's so much choice there. So start with something that you're comfortable with doing and something actually you might just enjoy, because if you can go to a networking event at a venue or doing an activity which something you would like to do, you can go as yourself and you're already comfortable in that space before you put your job title on your shoulder, I would say.
Absolutely. And in the digital space, Kerry?
Digital space is easier, I think, in some ways if you're an introvert, because you can just be a keyboard warrior. So I run careers insight events. We do 40. What we found was, I mean, we're dealing with totally different demographic, you know, 200 education providers across the Northeast, students who are 12, 13 up to 24, really different socioeconomic backgrounds and things going on there. Ask somebody to put their hand up and ask a question in a room full of people. It's very daunting at any age. But actually on a digital event, you're often anonymous. So you've got your screen off. You don't have to ask. You don't have to physically say. You can ask a question. You can share your thoughts. There's no judgment there because it's a networking event anyway. So maybe start with that. If that's what you're comfortable doing, then just go for the digital events and then you'll have a conversation. You know, you'll make connections. You'll follow up after on LinkedIn, like Sam said. There's no point going making all of these connections, saying all these wonderful things, and then not bothering. You're literally wasting your own time, let alone anyone else's. And follow up after, and then you'll just start that ball rolling. And you might never meet that person, but that person might be your closest professional confidant for your whole career. You know, so just do what you're comfortable with doing, I would say.
I think that's great advice, and I loved your earlier description of the segments of physical event attendees. That's very amusing. I think as well, it's worth reminding the introverts, I of which I count myself as one of them, that there are other introverts in the room, and if you walk up to an introvert and say, "Hi, I'd like to introduce myself," then people are so welcoming of that. They're so grateful that someone's made an effort to get to know them.
100%.
You're not the only introvert in the room.
No, absolutely. You know, you go to a networking event and not everyone in there is bouncing around like a children's TV presenter at 7 o'clock in the morning. It's not reality. It's reflective of real life and real personalities. There is somebody else like you in that room. There are people with less confidence in you in that room and people with more confidence, which will always be the same because it's a realistic mix of the world and characters and personalities and, you know, the many variety of human beings that are out there. But which is why I say use the tea and coffee station as your safe zone.
Yeah, great advice. Now we are planning to round out with some top tips from both Sam and Kerry, just to conclude the event. We have one more question, Sam, if I could pose that to you rather briefly, because I think it's a really valid question, which is what are the best ways to maintain relationships with people that you meet while networking? So if you could give me a brief answer to that, because I want to allow the time for the top tips.
Sure. Well, I think this is a really interesting one. Follow-up is so important for networking. And there's that fabulous and famous sort of quote that came, I think, from, I'm forgetting exactly who came. He said that, you'll tell me, 80% of success, Woody Allen, 80% of success is showing up, he said. Now, 80% of success with networking must be following up, because it's all very well meeting someone. And trust me, I'm also, like you two, a colossal introvert. Okay, so this is agony, you know, being out in public and on the stage still. But I've trained myself to do this, I think, much as Kerry says she's had. We've kind of come a long way since we started. But I think the important thing is to to follow up and to make sure you follow up meaningfully for that person. So you need to have listened. What was it that they really wanted? And then come back with something that's helpful. And then you need to keep following up. Because, for example, I mean, I'm still reaching out to people these days, and you can do something that I call, just one tip would be the saw this and thought of you message. What if there was someone that you met at a conference in Paris? All you need to do to re-engage with that person, say the Paris conference was back in 2014, okay? You haven't seen them since, but you got on really well while you were at that meeting. But now you realize, because you had that good conversation with your fellow introvert at this, by the coffee table, of course, you know that you're in that safe space, but you haven't got back in touch for some time. All you need to do is find a picture of the Eiffel Tower and say, saw this, thought of you. Send it to them on LinkedIn. Perfect. And you'll write back and you can say, can you believe it's been 8 years now? 8 years since, you know, we were together in Paris when we first met at that event doing X and Y. Remember what it was that you talked to them about? They're right back in that space with you, and your conversation is restarted. So there's just one of many potential tips of how to keep in touch. But the more regularly you can do it, Christmas messages, you don't need to get cringy about lots of massive round robin things, but sharing successes, complimenting, commenting when people get promotions, new jobs, so all those things help.
Yes, Sam, perfect. We'll always have Paris. Will stick in my mind.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. So we're going to move to the top tips now, Lucy and Danica. I think we have some slides here. Starting with Kerry. Kerry, your top tips as you've described them. So over to you, Kerry.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm on my phone, so these top tips are tiny and I can hardly see them, Danica, but I think I can remember them. The first one, personal brand. Yeah, that's right. It really goes back to what we're saying, and it as an answer to a previous question. You need to know who you are as a person, and know who you are as a person in your job role. Once you establish, you know, what you're about, what you're interested in, where your kind of knowledge base is, be happy to share that, be happy to engage. Don't overshare. One of the best tips I had is at a networking event, somebody said to me that 80% themselves and 20% private. So, you know, be yourself, and if you are the kind of person that's happy to share what you've done in the morning, your journey, your work, blah blah blah, like literally it's blah 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 to some people, be that person, but keep it right back. But definitely it's about your personal brand. You need to be the same person in real life at a networking event as you are on LinkedIn, and how you communicate with others, it needs to be fully rounded. You cannot be somebody else on a keyboard and whatever you post on LinkedIn to the person that you are in real life.
And your second one there, Kerry?
Oh, my second one, yes, sorry. Act with integrity. So always act with integrity. If something isn't right for you, don't go to it. You need to remember that if it's not right for you, you're not right for them. There's no point pretending to be interested in something that you have no knowledge on, because you're just caught out, you know, and you look a bit idiotic. And it's absolutely fine to say, hey, I don't know anything about that. You must always act with integrity. Like Sam just mentioned there, use those common things you have with somebody to, hey, I've found a picture of Paris, etc. But don't manufacture things, don't make them out to get an in will come if you have the patience to wait. Don't force it. And my last one is purpose. Know your purpose. Whatever you're going to, digital, online, you know, real life, know what that is and establish it. Now, that doesn't have to be a game-changing principle. If I go, I've got to go to this event because it will change my life, it will change my career, I will get the big job. It could literally be, I'm sick of being in the house for 6 months. I need to see some people and find out what else is going on in the business community around me. That is more than acceptable. But my point is, you must be able to justify to yourself, your boss, anybody else, why you're going to it, you know. And if you are going to improve your own brand, personal brand, because you really want to look for another job, don't think that that's not noticed by employers today. So if suddenly I don't know if you're working and if you work in a theatre and you're an actor and you suddenly want to go to a manufacturing forum, it might be obvious. So just be sensible. Know your purpose is my most important tip, I would say.
Excellent. Thank you, Kerry. Sam, can I turn to you for your top tips?
Of course. So here we go. Number one, I've mentioned this whole idea of the strength of weak ties. So your weak ties, remember, these are your acquaintances. They're not people that you've met all the time. They're not people that you live with or see regularly. but these are your professional acquaintances, okay? And what you need to do with them is to nurture the strength of that tie. And the way you do that is to be helpful, be kind, be generous. Simple as that. So find ways to, in social media, it's so easy. Like what they do. You know, when you see things flying past on your newsfeed, like it, comment on it, say something that's nice about it. Say something. Someone had just launched a podcast the other day. I wrote on it, can you tell me a bit more about how you got onto these interesting topics? Which was just a complete gift for them to go, here's more content, so that we've fed the news, just help people to be successful out there. So that's the thing. Work out who's out there. And of course, you can't do it with everyone you've ever met, but try to be helpful, try to be kind, try to be generous. That's how you nurture your weak ties. The second one is to serve your network, okay? So really, this is just to, again, try to be helpful. So once you've identified these people, try to help people as much as you possibly can. So you need to stay in their minds, and to do that, just make sure you're being helpful. Share things that are useful. The other day, I found some infographics from McKinsey. When someone makes an infographic, they want it to be shared. So don't worry, you're just curating that content. Find things that are useful to lots of people within your network, share them. And you can get people to click, you know, without being too clickbaity. You can just say things like, you know, I was amazed by point number 4. And they'll click and have a look at point number 4.
Yeah.
So you find ways to get people to engage with that content, but make sure you're being helpful. So give, don't worry about that. And the final one is to get slightly famous for one thing. Now, slightly famous, I call this slightly famous because we're not talking about Kardashian famous. It's not that kind of famous. It's about within your sector, within your industry, what are you known for? Like I said, you know, every office has got the hero on Excel who can make the chart look great very, very quickly. Or they can do pivot tables and all that genius stuff. But what we're talking about is, what are you famous for? What's the one thing you stand for in your weak ties mind, so that when they speak to somebody else and that somebody says to them, well, I need someone who can do this for me, they go, oh, you speak to Justin about that. He sounds like he'd be the right guy. So get famous for one thing and keep your posts as much as possible. Just as Kerry was saying at the very beginning, be strategic about what you share.
Fantastic.
They would be my tips.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sam. And I'll cover Herb's tips if I could. Herb, our third panelist, who was not able to join us this evening, I honestly don't know how we would have had time to necessarily leverage in Herb's commentary, because we've had so much from Sam and Kerry. So if we could move on to Herb's tips, and I'll just, we've skipped over those. We've run out of time, perhaps. So I'm getting the cue from Lucy that we've run out of time. Perhaps it's to me to round out the event with 1 minute to go, to thank Kerry and Sam, our panelists, for giving up their time to join us this evening. We're enormously grateful. I should give them both a nod and say to all of you that they are both Newcastle alum. So this is something we will no doubt ask all of you for to make a contribution to the university in a similar way. So thank you to Kerry and Sam for being so generous with your time. I'd also like to thank Lucy and Danica, who in the background have made all of this wonderfully happen. I would be completely lost without them both. So thank you very much. So that's the end of the broadcast this evening. I'll say goodbye.
Can I just interrupt? Sorry, and
yes,
just say,
course, Lucy,
Justin, you're being very kind in thanking us. And yes, we would like to also thank Sam and Kerry. So thank you very much for taking part and sharing all of that really useful and helpful information. Lots of things for me to take away there, and I'm sure for everyone else as well. Now, in the chat, you should find, hopefully, there's a PDF of these top tips, including Herb's, for you to download and take away. There is a feedback poll on your screen. If you could just fill that in very quickly for us, just to let us know what you thought of the event. And you should be able to see, once you've completed that feedback poll, that we have lots of events coming up. So tomorrow, for example, at lunchtime at 1 o'clock, we have Newcastle Discover, which is about pension essentials. So if you've got any questions about pensions and you fancy coming on and joining that on your lunch break. And also our next Newcastle Develop series is event is on Wednesday the 23rd of March, and that will be about career breaks, how to plan them, what you can do around asking new employers and looking into that. And so we've got another great panel coming together who have taken career breaks for various different reasons. So do please check out either using the QR code or that link there to our events webpage, because we've got lots of events coming, and it would be great to have you register on them, which you can do through those links. Also, we had the information about the LinkedIn group, and as Sam mentioned and Kerry have, we're alumni here, so you've got kind of an open network right there. So join the LinkedIn group for Newcastle alumni. Keep the conversations going. Look for people who have been at the event. We will put a post up there so that you can say that you've attended, and then you know you've got like-minded people who joined us. Justin, I would like to say a big thank you for chairing this event. It has been fantastic, and your way of managing everything has been brilliant, and we really, really appreciate your time. So thank you very much. Thank you again for all of you joining us. We will let the winner of our prize draw know for the coffee voucher, but I'm sure the main thing that you'll take away is the fantastic advice and tips that we've heard tonight. So thank you all again for joining us.